Undercover CEO unexpectedly discovers touching truth behind kitchen. Cries transformation revealed. The bell above the diner door jingled, a familiar sound at the end of her long shifts. Sarah wiped her brow, the sweat mingling with the grease-scented air. As head chef, she was both the backbone and heart of this establishment, pouring her love into every dish, the pancakes, the burgers, but it was her kids' faces she saw every time she plated a meal. Each bill she faced at home reminded her of her dreams of culinary school that faded further away with each late-night shift. The clamor of dishes being washed and orders being called echoed the sacrifices she had made. Ethan strode in, handsome and sharply dressed, his struggles unfamiliar to this world. He observed her from the corner, intrigued by how she could juggle the chaos, answering phone calls from her kids while orchestrating her staff with a confidence that challenged his corporate training. He was there under the guise of a management project, but as he watched her smile through her exhaustion, he felt something shift within him, a twinge of discomfort born from her reality contrasting with his sterile, boardroom existence. Could she accept help, he wondered? Or would she resent the lifeline he could easily throw? He shared idle conversation with her team, learning their names, their dreams. A cook with aspirations of owning his own food truck and an elderly dishwasher bursting with tales of the neighborhood resonated with him more than any corporate meeting. Yet, as laughter filled the space, he saw the fatigue etched deeper into the lines of Sarah's face. It unsettled him. She was a pillar, but a damaged one. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The sudden sound of clattering dishes jolted him from his thoughts. The elderly dishwasher collapsed, the sound of his fall echoing like a gunshot through the diner. Panic spread through the room as Sarah rushed to his side, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. The moments stretched painfully, emotions intertwining. She looked up at Ethan, desperation spilling from her eyes. Every instinct told her not to accept charity, not to swallow the pride built through years of relentless work. Ethan stood frozen, flooded with confusion. He had the power, the connections, the resources to save the diner and the man who'd fed her crew and their stories. But what signal would that send? Would it be seen as a well-intentioned disruption or an unwelcome intrusion into her battles? As she struggled to maintain poise in the swirling chaos, he felt the weight of their staring eyes, hers demanding respect for her journey, while his own heart cried out for action. Tension filled the air, choking any hope of straightforward redemption, leaving both him and Sarah caught in a dilemma that threatened everything they believed about pride, survival, and community. The decision loomed larger than life, a choice that would define them both and potentially shatter the fragile world they had carefully built. Adrenaline coursed through Sarah as she knelt next to the elderly dishwasher, Mr. Jenkins, feeling the onset of panic clawing at her insides. She could hear her team murmuring in distress, but her focus narrowed to a singular breath as she checked for a pulse. It felt like an eternity before his eyes blinked open, and she exhaled deeply. Yet, even relief couldn't wash away the discomfort in her chest. "Call 911. She shouted, her voice rising above the chaos while steadying his head in her lap. It was second nature for her to take charge, a reflex honed through years of pressure and responsibility, but the weight of vulnerability seemed to settle over her like a heavy cloak. Ethan's urgent footsteps closed the distance, and Sarah could feel his breath on her neck, the heat of his body radiating a conflicted energy. She was aware of his observing gaze, weighing, analyzing. Yet, her walls stood firm. She didn't need saving, certainly not from someone who had lived a life of privilege outside the diner walls. "Is he breathing?" Ethan asked, crouching beside her, his corporate instincts surging, shifting from theoretical to practical. "Just help, all right?" Sarah snapped, the words laced with exhaustion and frustration. She could sense he wanted to encroach on her domain, and for some reason, that irritated her more than the fact that an elder had collapsed in the middle of her kitchen. The sirens whirred into the distance, yet the deafening roar of her memories blocked it all out. Every time she faced something difficult, she pushed through using grit alone. Moments like these reminded her too vividly of the fractures in her fragile reality, and the fear of losing something she fought so hard to create gnawed on her very core. While the team rallied to assist Mr. Jenkins, Sarah leaned back against the wall, her eyes re-evaluating the entirety of her life. Suddenly, that question lingering in the recesses of her mind surfaced violently: was it too late for her to chase her dream? With mounting responsibilities and the burden of caring for her children, the idea of culinary school felt out of reach. Ethan, observing her struggle, looked at her with a determined expression. "Sarah, you need to step back. Let us figure this out together." His voice was soothing but carried an edge of urgency. There it was again, help wrapped in authority. She glimpsed the sincerity in his eyes, but it repulsed her. Patting the edges of her pride, she steadied herself before responding. "What do you know about my life? I'm not some project for you to fix. My whole world doesn't revolve around what you can offer." Ethan pressed his lips together, the silence between them rife with unspoken truths. What did he see in her? Determination? Fragility? A mix of both, perhaps? After all, beneath the surface of her brusque demeanor was a potent drive, and the air crackled with the burgeoning realization that they were alike in some ways. Both at a crossroads, him trying to reconcile corporate ideals with real-world struggles, and her grappling with the dilemma of pride against desperate need. As the paramedics arrived, their efficient movements wrestled her back into the present, but inside, the cyclone of emotions had ripped open a clarity. The diner wasn't just a place of work, it was a garden where both wounds and hopes lingered, and her resolve would be the seed from which new growth could emerge. Ethan had glimpsed the kernel of her fire, and she wondered if leaning on someone like him could lead to a spark of change in her life. Yet offering herself to vulnerability, to change, felt impossible. As the commotion dwindled and the paramedics tended to Mr. Jenkins, that reflection of self occurred: was she ready to let herself believe it wasn't just about survival anymore? The answer seemed to waver like a delicate flame, and as Sarah turned her back towards Ethan, she felt a surge of determination brush against the wistfulness of her hidden dreams. It pushed her forward, whispering possibilities, ever so gently challenging her resolve. What if the leap required not just a step back, but a step towards something greater? The diner buzzed slightly quieter now, an undercurrent of transition swirling within its walls. And as she refocused on the work that still lay ahead, the question loomed larger: would she grasp the new opportunities that might come from allowing vulnerability, or would it send her spiraling deeper into her own fears? The remaining hours of the shift passed by in a blur, but the aftermath of Mr. Jenkins' collapse lingered like a stubborn shadow. Sarah operated on autopilot, her movements instinctive yet mechanical as she plated dishes and whispered encouraging words to the rest of the crew. Each task was a breadcrumb leading her back from the edge of her overwhelming thoughts. Despite the chaos around her, Sarah's mind was not on the kitchen, it spiraled into the depths of self-reflection. The contrast between her usual steely resolve and the twinge of vulnerability she had felt earlier gnawed at her. Could she really consider taking steps toward culinary school? The persistent question hung over her like a dark cloud, dimming her routine as a new fear brewed beneath the surface, a fear that she might not be enough to pursue her dreams. Ethan remained tethered to her thoughts. His presence had unsettled, yet intrigued her. What would it mean to accept help from him? Each interaction felt like dancing on a tightrope suspended between need and pride. Their worlds collided in that chaotic moment, exposing both her inner turmoil and his relentless ambition. She fixed her gaze on his determined yet compassionate demeanor, a reminder that vulnerability could very well be a pathway to something she craved. A chance to reignite her culinary passion. During a lull in the hectic shift, Sarah retreated to the staff room, seeking a moment of solitude. The flickering fluorescent lights mirrored her state of mind, and she found herself staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. Was there still a spark of aspiration within her tightly wound exterior? Forcing herself to breathe deeply, she tried to quell the indecision that fluttered in her chest. How can I have a dream when every second is already accounted for? She muttered to the reflection. Yet, beneath her weariness, there lay an ember of hope waiting to be stoked. As the diner's busy noise faded into the background, her internal dialogue pivoted. She realized that to dream would require her to face her fears, specifically the fear of failure and the specter of guilt that came with pursuing a goal at the expense of family time. Would initiating change signal neglect? Or would it better equip her to provide for them? She took a moment, envisioning culinary school, the smell of fresh herbs, the rhythm of a kitchen filled with bright-eyed students. It conjured feelings of excitement, passion, and most importantly, purpose. If she were to grow, perhaps her family would flourish as a natural consequence. Yet her old patterns of self-doubt flared to life, whispering relentlessly that she was not worthy of such aspirations. Time ticked on, the diner's rhythm resumed, but she felt tethered to her spot. In a sudden burst of resolve, she reached for her phone and sent Ethan a text. "Can we talk? I need some input on something." The minutes that followed felt excruciating. Was she really reaching out? The act felt foreign and vulnerable, yet somehow electrifying, a flicker of boldness that she hadn't indulged in for years. Almost guiltily, she realized this was her first step, a tentative yet significant leap toward something more. When Ethan replied affirmatively, she felt butterflies of both dread and excitement agitate her stomach. What would that conversation bring? After the shift ended and the last customer left, Sarah found herself waiting nervously at a corner table. She cradled her thoughts, unsure of how to articulate what was brewing inside her, what she needed from him. She practiced words in her mind. "I've been thinking about culinary school." But her heart raced in stark contrast, urging her to turn back. What if he treated her ambitions as a whimsy? As the door swung open and Ethan stepped inside, he radiated warmth and purpose, cutting through her swirling insecurities. He flashed a reassuring smile, the kind that seemed to say he understood the twists of the human heart. With a resolve that felt both new and perilous, she knew she would need to confront her fears head-on and perhaps share the dreams she had kept hidden for far too long. This wasn't just about discussing culinary aspirations, it was an opportunity to redefine her entire narrative. And as their eyes met, she felt the charged air between them shift. The moment was ripe, filled with unsaid promise and tension. But what if this leap into vulnerability unleashed not only her dreams but also a storm of unforeseen consequences she wasn't prepared to handle? The moment hung between them, fraught with unspoken words and desperate hopes. Sarah's stomach twisted, and her mind raced. She studied Ethan's expression, searching for a cue, an inkling of how to broach the conversation that felt like a chasm opening beneath her feet. "What did you want to discuss?" Ethan asked, his tone casual but his eyes keen, as if he could sense her hesitation. Sarah's breath caught. Here was this formidable force of ambition in front of her, embodying everything she yearned to be yet felt shackled from pursuing. How could he understand the labyrinth of emotions whirling within her? "I've been thinking about culinary school," she finally blurted out, the truth cracking the dam of her silence. Ethan's smile widened, illuminating his face. He leaned forward, intrigued. "That's amazing. What sparked the interest?" The irony struck her hard. His enthusiasm contrasted sharply with her reservations. "I've always loved cooking, but with everything going on, it just feels unrealistic." The weight of her words settled heavily on her shoulders, a tangible reminder of the conflict between her deepest desires and her responsibilities. "Unrealistic? Why?" Ethan challenged gently. "You have the talent. You definitely have the passion. What's holding you back?" In that moment, Sarah felt naked. Her vulnerabilities felt exposed, and the fear of failure clawed at her. "What if I'm not good enough?" she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it ends up being a waste of time?" A serious look crossed Ethan's face, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't understand. But then he said, "We all have doubts. It's what pushes us to grow. Do you want it badly enough to fight through those thoughts?" The question resonated, echoing in the corners of her mind where she had hidden her dreams. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, feeling the pull between her reality and what could be. "I want it," she admitted, the truth escaping like a breath she had been holding too long. "But I can't afford to indulge in a dream if it means neglecting my family." Ethan nodded, empathy washing over his features. "What if you looked at it differently? Pursuing culinary school could empower you, make you more fulfilled. You might just find ways to inspire your family along the way." His words ignited something within her. A flicker of possibility flared, illuminating the smothering doubts that had long held her captive. Could pursuing her own dreams elevate her family rather than drag them down? She felt a rush of defiance. Maybe she trailed off, emboldening her to peel back layers of her self-imposed limitations. A shaky determination began to swell inside her, pushing her to envision a future where she flourished, not at her family's expense but alongside them. "How would you even start?" Ethan asked, an encouraging grin crossing his face, purchasing her thoughts and redirecting them toward action, rather than retreat. Maybe I could look into part-time classes, see if I can juggle them with work." It sounded like an excuse, but it felt right. "Great," he affirmed, his enthusiasm vibrant. "Small steps. You could even shadow someone now, get a taste of what cooking at that level looks like." Sarah thought it over, the gears of ambition slowly starting to turn. It was time to harness that ember of desire, but she knew she had to confront her guilt first, the tether that bound her to uncertainty. "What if I fail?" she blurted, the words tumbling out again. Ethan's expression hardened slightly, shifting the air around them. "What if you succeed? Wouldn't that be worth the risk?" The challenge was no longer metaphysical, it hung palpably in the air like the scent of fresh herbs, insistent and inescapable. As they discussed practical steps, Sarah felt a kaleidoscope of emotions swirl together: excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of liberation. The conversation felt like the first rays of dawn after a long, dark night. But within her blossoming hope lay unanswered questions. Was she truly ready to embrace the change? And would the risks she would take in pursuit of her passion ultimately fracture the fragility of her family's current state? As the conversation deepened and Ethan delved further into plans and possibilities, an uncomfortable reality loomed: what awaited her beyond the threshold of comfort and routine. Where would this path actually lead her, and what unforeseen consequences would accompany the pursuit of a dream she had tucked away for too long? Before she could articulate those emerging doubts, the waitress called her to the counter, the din of the diner reminding her of the world she was simultaneously part of and distancing herself from. The gravity of her aspirations clashed violently with the painful yet familiar responsibilities tethering her. The next step was looming, and as Sarah grappled with the implications, she finally realized her journey had just begun. Something was changing within her. Would she have the courage to claim it? Sarah stood at the counter, her hands clutching the worn menu as she replayed her conversation with Ethan in her mind. The ideas he had sparked swirled through her thoughts like the steam rising from a nearby cup of coffee. Each possibility glimmered with potential, yet each was accompanied by the weight of her ever-present doubts. With her turned back to the bustling diner, she tried to focus on the energy of the cafe, the laughter of children, the clatter of dishes, and the comforting aroma of baking bread. But underneath it all, a narrative of fear and ambition played out within her. She was at a crossroads, and every fiber of her being wanted to leap toward the unknown path, yet trepidation kept her rooted, a statue of indecision. What if perhaps looking into culinary school meant endless sleepless nights? What if juggling classes, work, and family demands pushed her to her breaking point? The practical voices in her head clamored for attention, but every now and then, a flicker of hope ignited that made her long to tear through the noise. To quell the doubts, Sarah turned her thoughts back to the specifics of pursuing her culinary dreams. She recalled Ethan's suggestion about shadowing a chef. What would that entail? Would reaching out to someone experiencing the raw excitement and daunting challenges of a kitchen help her gauge whether she truly belonged in that world? Suddenly, a thought struck her. She knew someone, a family friend who owned a local bistro. She'd spent many childhood hours tagging along as they prepared for busy dinner services. The memories rippled through her, the clattering pans, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, and the laughter that erupted in the chaos of the kitchen. Maybe, just maybe, she could grasp that familiar energy again, but this time as an aspiring chef rather than a child watching from the sidelines. Determination surged through her. If she could muster the courage to reach out, it might illuminate the way forward, offer clarity amidst the fog of doubt. Furthermore, making that initial step could demonstrate to herself that she was ready to risk something more than comfort. She was ready to challenge the narrative she had set for herself resolutely. She grabbed a napkin from the counter and scribbled down her friend's contact information, her fingers trembling with the electricity of potential. The ink secured her intention, a tangible commitment to that which had long felt elusive. But as soon as excitement filled her, so too did hesitation. What if her friend dismissed her? What if they laughed at her dreams? What if her family questioned why she was compounding her workload for a fleeting passion? The flip-flop of her emotions threatened to engulf her, yet she grounded herself with a deep breath. She had to start somewhere, and the first step didn't need to be grand, it only needed to be taken. Later that night, as the shadows crept into her living room, Sarah clutched her phone, heart racing as she dialed. Each ring felt like a countdown to her courage fading. What if she hung up? Hello? The voice on the other end was warm, familiar, it filled her with a rush of comfort. Hi, it's Sarah, she stammered. I've been thinking about culinary school, and I was wondering if I could, come by and see what it's like in the kitchen, perhaps shadow you for a day? The silence stretched, her heart pounding in anticipation of either support or dismissal. I'd love that. Her friend replied enthusiastically. We can arrange a day this week. Relief washed over her like a wave, though it was tangled with nerves. She was getting closer to uncovering her passion, to rediscovering what lay dormant within her. But lurking behind that excitement was the constant scrutiny of her choices, the underlying gnaw of her family's well-being about to collide with her own pursuit of happiness. As they finalized the details, Sarah felt the familiar constraints of her responsibilities tugging at her heart. Was this worth the potential upheaval? Uncertainty hovered in the back of her mind as she ended the call and placed her phone down. The kitchen posed a new frontier, and her next steps danced before her in shimmering anticipation, coupled with trepidation. She was on the brink of action, ready to explore her long-dormant aspirations, yet the reality of those hurdles remained palpable. The delicate balance she sought between self-fulfillment and familial obligations still loomed large. What awaited her in that bustling kitchen could be the spark of transformation she yearned for, but would the fire strengthen her or consume her? As she pondered those lingering questions, she picked up her phone again, staring at the screen, conscious that another significant decision loomed just ahead. Would she share this budding ambition with her family? Did they have a right to know what surged within her? The tension of this uncertainty marked a new chapter in her journey, challenging her to confront not just her aspirations but how they intertwined with her deepest values and bonds. The following morning, as sunlight broke through the clouds, Sarah felt an unfamiliar sense of urgency pounding beneath her skin. She barely touched her usual breakfast. It was as if the thought of the kitchen had ignited something dormant, stirring her into action. She could hardly contain herself, oscillating between anticipation and dread. Today, she would step into a world that had always felt just out of reach. Dressed in comfortable attire, she arrived at the bistro, her mind racing with the details of what lay ahead. Would she be able to keep pace with the frenetic energy of a kitchen? She had fond memories of helping her friend with simpler tasks, slicing, mixing, and garnishing, but this was different. Now, she was stepping in as a quasi-intern, a role that could either solidify her ambition or shatter her romantic illusions about culinary life. As she pushed through the bistro's glass doors, the aroma of simmering garlic tingled her senses. It was everything she had envisioned and more, a scene alive with vibrant colors and cacophony, the rush of orders being called out, the laughter of workers exchanging banter, and the pungent scent of fresh herbs. It was intoxicating. Sarah was greeted with warm enthusiasm by her friend, Melissa, who immediately plunged her into the chaos of lunchtime prep. Welcome! Grab that parsley and chop it, we'll need it for the chimichurri. Melissa directed as she handed Sarah a sharp knife. The urgency in her voice was infectious. Sarah nodded, her mind racing to follow instructions as she swiftly gathered the herbs, but as she began chopping, a gnawing question surfaced amidst the excitement. What if she'd been romanticizing cooking, believing it to be the key to her happiness? With each chop, she felt not just the adrenaline of engagement but also pins of apprehension, reminding her of her responsibilities at home. Hours turned into a flurry of movement. The energy of the kitchen was relentless, with orders piling up and teamwork flowing seamlessly. Sarah unexpectedly found that her hands moved automatically, her body adjusting to the rhythm. For the first time, she felt the palpable satisfaction of contributing to something larger than herself. But each moment of joy was tinged with doubt. Was she truly cut out for this? During a brief reprieve, Melissa pulled her aside. You're a natural. How do you feel? Sarah hesitated. It's exhilarating, but I don't want to lose sight of my responsibilities. I have my family and, well, what if this is just a fleeting passion? Melissa studied her for a moment, then offered a candid smile. Remember, passion won't drown your responsibilities, it will sharpen your focus. Sometimes you have to invest in yourself to truly give to others. Those words echoed as they returned to the cooking. But doubts continued to wrestle for control of her mind. Was she willing to make sacrifices for this dream? As the kitchen buzzed with excitement and energy, Sarah felt an internal clash take place, her dreams against the reality of her life demands. The lunch rush concluded, leaving her breathless but exhilarated. The immediate challenge of preparing dishes had dulled her inner voices of doubt, and she savored everything she had accomplished. Yet when the day waned, and the kitchen settled, the thoughts rushed back in full force. The delicate balance of pursuing her passion while maintaining her obligations weighed heavily on her heart. As Sarah prepared to leave, Melissa noticed her pensiveness. Just remember, this is your journey. It's okay to explore the unknown, but you must also find alignment with your values. As they exchanged goodbyes, determination flared anew within Sarah. The culinary world was invigorating, yet as much as she cherished the spicy chaos, she still needed to confront her reality. That night, with her heart still racing with the day's adventure, Sarah toyed with her phone, contemplating a message to her family. What if they fully understood her passion? Would they help her navigate this uncharted territory? Her finger hovered over the screen as doubts wrestled in her mind. Would these revelations bring her closer to them or force them into deeper separation? Somewhere between revelation and uncertainty, Sarah grasped that sharing her journey was a leap of faith, but perhaps necessary to carve the future she envisioned. The time had come to face the music, but would her revelation prompt understanding or push them apart? The next morning, Sarah awoke with a flicker of intent dancing in her chest. The kitchen chaos from the day before lingered in her mind like the spices from Melissa's station. After pushing through moments of self-doubt, she felt a shift within, a burgeoning desire to embrace this burgeoning dream of hers without reservations. Her family's understanding was important, but she also realized that she needed to carve out her own belief in her abilities. She prepared breakfast with a newfound zest, mirroring the culinary artistry she had tasted at the bistro. As she sautéed vegetables, her mind wandered to the conversations she had held with Melissa. The passion, although chaotic and sometimes unearthed doubts, was alive within her. It demanded recognition. By noon, Sarah was once again at the bistro, ready to dive into the world she aspired to belong to. The rhythm of the kitchen pulsed with the same electric energy, but this time she felt more rooted. No longer just a guest, she wore her apron like armor, ready to defend her ambition against the creeping notion that she wasn't enough. Back again? Melissa flashed her a smile. Perfect timing. We got a funeral of a banquet tomorrow. Ready to help us prep? The urgency in her friend's voice spurred both excitement and anxiety in Sarah. Absolutely. What do you need me to do? As orders flew, Sarah kept pace, following Melissa's lead. The knife in her hand felt familiar, almost like an extension of herself. Chopping, dicing, and garnishing, each task ignited a clarity of purpose she had long yearned for. Yet, a flicker of guilt still lingered at the edges of her resolve. Where's this beautiful garlic from? She asked Melissa, pointing to a basket brimming with fresh cloves. It's from that farm down south. Helps to keep our dishes fresh and keeps the passion alive. Speaking of which, how are you balancing all this with your family? Melissa's tone softened, and her gaze probed. Sarah hesitated, the sizzling sounds around them faltering just for a moment. I wish they understood. I'm torn between this passion and my responsibilities. The last thing I want is to seem selfish. Melissa nodded knowingly. Sometimes sharing is the essence of not being selfish. Show them what you love. It could take the burden off your shoulders. The notion struck Sarah deeply. Her family needed to see this part of her. They needed to witness her transformation into the person she wished to become. By not sharing her passion, she was inadvertently keeping them at arm's length. The moment flickered like a flame, illuminating the dark corners of her fears. With renewed conviction, she decided to invite them over for a family dinner, where she would cook with the intention to share her journey. A small act, yet one that could bridge the growing distance of misunderstanding. The thought simultaneously thrilled and terrified her, igniting another whirlwind of emotions. As the night wore on and the kitchen wrapped up, she could feel the weight of the day settling into a thought, a message forming in her mind. Instead of burying her desires or avoiding the confrontation that awaited her, she would embrace it. With each satisfied smile from the staff and the thrill of contributing to a greater purpose, Sarah was no longer just wondering if she was cut out for this, she was becoming the embodiment of that identity. Yet, the thought lingered, would her family embrace this newfound phase of her life, or would they resist the changes she was initiating? As she finished up her shift, the euphoria of culinary creation woven with concern, Sarah made her way home, her mind set on crafting the perfect message. The threshold of vulnerability loomed just ahead, and she knew that stepping into it could either pave the way for enlightenment or shatter her fragile sense of belonging in her dual life. What awaited her on the other side of this conversation felt like an unraveling tapestry, each thread representing a different element of her life. And as she sat down to write that message, a question flickered in her mind: could vulnerability be the key that unlocked a new understanding between her and her family? As Sarah stood in her kitchen that night, her heart raced in sync with the rhythmic chop of her knife against the cutting board. The seemingly mundane act of preparing dinner morphed into a pivotal ritual of defiance, a refusal to be a shadow. Each vegetable she sliced held not just flavor, but a weighty promise. Tonight was not just dinner, it was her unveiling. She meticulously arranged the ingredients, her vision of a meal that would encapsulate her journey, her passion, and her love for cooking. As garlic sizzled, releasing its fragrant, earthy aroma, she found herself lost in the complexity of flavor layering. It mirrored her struggle, how the simple act of cooking could peel back layers of disappointment and self-doubt. The once familiar sounds of her family bustling around the house felt different now. Instead of feeling the pressure of their expectations stifling her, she sensed their curiosity beginning to bloom. The invitation to dinner had been a gamble, putting her heart on display for their scrutiny. But the belief she had cultivated within herself allowed for no retreat. While waiting for the food to simmer, Sarah's mind ventured into those shadowy corners of her past, moments when she believed her dreams were frivolous. She recalled tense dinners filled with unspoken words, expectations that loomed like shadows. Her family's love transformed into conditional approval, grades, careers, security. The culinary world stood in stark contrast, a sanctuary of creativity unmarred by judgment. Sarah turned her attention back to her task, and as she plated the colorful array, she couldn't help but think of Melissa's advice. This evening was about sharing her true self. The fear that had previously wrapped around her heart began to soften. What if her family's skepticism was merely a reflection of their love, shaped by their own fears? In this moment of clarity, a determination surged. If she could face her own fears, perhaps they could confront theirs. When her family gathered around the dining table, the tension was palpable. Conversations began hesitantly, the air thick with unspoken curiosity. As she set down the first dish, vibrant vegetables nestled next to perfectly cooked grains, she watched their expressions flicker from surprise to cautious optimism. The kitchen was no longer a chaotic space, it transformed into an arena of shared vulnerability. "Wow, this looks incredible!" her younger brother exclaimed, his wide eyes reflecting genuine admiration. It charged the atmosphere, shifting the dynamics from skepticism to support. As she served them, pouring her heart into each bite, she mustered the courage to articulate her dreams. "I want to become a chef," she declared, her voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. "Cooking is not just a hobby for me anymore. It's my dream, my passion. I want to pursue this path." Her mother's brows furrowed, and for a heartbeat, Sarah braced for the familiar wave of doubt. Yet, instead of resistance, she noticed a flicker of understanding in her mother's eyes, a silent acknowledgement that this wasn't merely a whim. "Is that why you've been spending so much time at that bistro?" her mother asked, her tone softer than Sarah had anticipated. "Exactly," Sarah replied, feeling a rush of relief. Stepping into vulnerability was like illumination in the darkest corners of her heart, shedding light on hidden fears. The conversation gradually flowed, revealing layers of compromise and uncharted fears. Each dish brought forth stories, laughter, and comfortable familiarity that had been overshadowed. They began to share their own dreams, ambitions long tucked away under life's responsibilities. Sarah felt the walls they had unknowingly built start to crumble, brick by brick. But still, uncertainties flickered at the edge of this burgeoning revelation. Would they truly support her in this, or would doubt creep back in to intertwine with their love? As dinner concluded, Sarah was left with a powerful mix of hope and apprehension. Sharing her heart opened new doors, but what lay ahead required continued bravery. She could sense that this was only the beginning, a threshold crossed, but fraught with new challenges. As they cleared the table, Sarah's heart beat with a new conviction. She had shared her world with those she loved, and it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Yet deep within, a relentless question pulsated through her thoughts: would the acceptance she craved remain steadfast, or was her journey about to invite scrutiny that could send her spiraling back into self-doubt? The following morning, sunlight streamed into Sarah's kitchen, illuminating the remnants of last night's meal. As she wiped down the counters, each stroke of the cloth was a quiet affirmation of her renewed sense of purpose. The flavors of her dinner still lingered in her mind, but so did her family's tentative praise and the uncertainty that flickered in their eyes. She had cleared the first hurdle, but the race was far from over. Determination surged within her as she reflected on her conversation with her mother. The small shift in her mother's demeanor echoed in her mind, the flicker of understanding, the softening of skepticism. Could this be the start of something transformative? Yet, apprehension clung to her like a damp dishcloth, reminding her of the shadows that still lingered. She grabbed her phone and texted Melissa. "Can we meet? I need to talk strategies." She had already carved out space for her culinary ambitions, but now she was ready to define a more structured approach, one that would shift her cooking from a personal passion to a professional pursuit. The cafe where they met buzzed with morning energy. Coffee machines hissed, and the aroma of fresh pastries wafted through the air as Sarah waited at a corner table, her heart racing with excitement and apprehension. Melissa arrived, her eyes lighting up as she spotted Sarah. "You look energized," Melissa remarked, joining her at the table. "I think I'm finally ready to dive deeper into this," Sarah replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I want to pursue culinary school, maybe start by working more hours at the bistro." "That's a fantastic step. But have you thought about what comes next?" Melissa encouraged. Questions started to tumble through Sarah's mind. What would it mean to balance her job, school, and her family's expectations? "I'll need a plan. How do I manage my time? What if I can't keep up with everything?" Melissa leaned in, her voice earnest. "The key is to prioritize. You have to carve out dedicated time for your studies and practice, but also allow space for family and self-care. If they see your commitment, they'll be more likely to support your journey." Exhaling slowly, Sarah began to map out her ambitions. Juggling school, work, and family wasn't just about logistics. It unearthed the deeper question of whether she would allow her dreams to fully bloom or shrink back into the shadows. Melissa's phone buzzed, breaking her focus. "Let us take it step by step," she said, returning to the conversation. "Have you considered entering a competition or cooking class? That could not only refine your skills but also bolster your confidence." A flicker of excitement ignited in Sarah's chest. A culinary competition could be her stage, a space to showcase her burgeoning talent. What if it could challenge her, force her to confront her fears head-on? But another truth brought with it a pang of doubt. Was she truly prepared to put herself in front of critics, to risk failure publicly? "Competition is tough," she murmured, anxiety creeping into her voice. "What if I fail?" Melissa raised an eyebrow. "What if you succeed?" This journey is about growth, not perfection. Every cook makes mistakes. Look at it as part of the learning curve. It was profound yet challenging advice. Could she embrace the imperfect journey and still cultivate her passion? The idea tantalized her, but the stakes felt high. As they chatted, Sarah's resolve strengthened. She outlined her plans for the upcoming weeks, setting tangible goals: spend extra hours at the bistro, find local competitions, enroll in a cooking workshop. Each item on her list acted as a beacon, guiding her toward her culinary dreams. As the morning drew to a close, an unanticipated wall of emotion washed over her. This moment wasn't just about dreaming, it was about committing to action and facing fears, both in the kitchen and within her family. But a gnawing apprehension haunted her. What would happen when she faced the inevitable missteps? Was she prepared to let her aspirations play out in front of an audience that might not always cheer for her? The stakes were rising, and she could sense a pivotal moment ahead, a culminating instance where courage would be tested and her essence laid bare once again. As she left the cafe, a question pulsed in her mind, throbbing like a metronome: was she truly ready to risk vulnerability and face the scrutiny that might follow? In the weeks that followed, Sarah plunged into her journey with an unwavering focus. Each day brought a new challenge, a new dish to hone, and detail to perfect. The fear of failure lingered but transformed into a quiet hum, a reminder that growth often necessitates discomfort. She found herself at the bistro for increasingly longer hours, her apron becoming a symbol of newfound purpose. Each evening brought the whir of activity, a symphony of sizzling pans and the laughter of her co-workers that had fueled her resolve. The culinary competition she had signed up for loomed ever closer, a daunting yet exhilarating arena where her culinary prowess would face judgment. During the nights of preparation, the distant sound of her children giggling in the living room served as a soundtrack, weaving together her worlds of ambition and motherhood. She shared her progress with them, bringing home stories of her experiences in the kitchen. Each happy moment was a testament that pursuing her dreams didn't mean sacrificing their connection. It reinforced the belief in following one's passion, but it wasn't without its challenges. A particularly demanding week left her exhausted and on the brink of panic. Juggling responsibilities at home and hours in the kitchen weighed heavily as deadlines for the competition approached. One evening, nerves overwhelmed her during dinner prep at the bistro, and there she stood, a wrist deep in pancake batter, paralyzed by doubt. In that instant, a memory from her initial conversations with Ethan rushed back, where he had insisted that the need to fail was simply part of mastery. Breathing deeply, she steadied herself, her phone buzzing beside her with a message from Ethan, checking in on her preparations. Reflecting on his encouragement, she realized that the true risk lay not in failure but in denying herself the opportunity to pursue her passion. Today's the day, she whispered to herself, a mantra freshly ignited. She focused on each ingredient, each task at hand, allowing that vibrant energy from her past culinary experiences to guide her. When the day of the competition arrived, she was engulfed in equal parts excitement and nausea. The venue throbbed with a cacophony of energy, participants hustling, judges guiding, and the burn of anticipation in the air. Sarah took her place behind her station, surrounded by fellow competitors whose spirit echoed her own journey. As the clock ticked down and plates were simmering with her creations, she felt the familiar rush of doubt creeping in. But just as a wave of anxiety nearly overwhelmed her, she remembered her family's tentative support, the joy that lit their faces at her culinary tales. Every chop and sauté became more than just a competition, it transformed into a celebration of her journey, a tribute to her resilience. The judges arrived, tasting her dish, the final plating a harmonious blend of flavors and heart. Her confidence solidified as positive comments punctuated the air. Innovative, one judge pronounced. Flawlessly executed, proclaimed another. Pride washed over her, not just for the dish itself but for the understanding that she had transformed culinary skills aside, she was stepping into her identity as a chef. When the judges announced the winners, the exhilaration of the moment surged through her veins. To hear her name called as a finalist was a validation she had never expected. Cheers and applause filled the room, enveloping her in a warm embrace of acknowledgement. As she stood at the front, soaking in this moment of recognition, it struck her, every sleepless night, every ounce of effort, and each hesitant step toward her dreams had culminated in this? Not just recognition of her cooking skills, but acknowledgement of her journey and transformation. The pride she once reserved for her children now filled her being, a testament to her growth not just as a chef but as a person. Leaving the competition, she clutched the certificate that labeled her as a finalist. Every letter represented the bridge built toward a renewed relationship with her aspirations and family. Arriving home, her children rushed to her, fascination dancing in their eyes as they gazed at the triumphant trophy. "You did it, Mom!" they exclaimed, their voices ringing with admiration. In that moment, she understood, this was not only about her pursuing culinary school but modeling to them the essence of following one's dreams, a lesson in vulnerability, courage, and hope. "Let us celebrate with a family dinner," she proclaimed, their faces lighting up at the idea. Together, they gathered, joyfully preparing a meal that honored every flavor of her journey, embracing the complexities of their lives woven into a shared narrative. As she plated the first dish, each scoop and sprinkle felt like an echo to the love she poured into everything she created. Her heart sang, not just with the thrill of achievements but with newfound solid confidence. Sarah had conquered fears, proven her competencies, and established herself not just as a mother, but as someone who chased dreams unapologetically. Reflecting on her journey, she finally understood the profound connection between vulnerability and strength. Having embraced both, She was ready for whatever awaited her next, empowered by her achievements and the promise of dreams waiting patiently for her to pursue. So here's the call to action. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that celebrate personal transformations like Sarah's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find this inspiring journey. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's outstanding journey to culinary success, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel. Your engagement means everything.